All right, so today we are taking a deep dive,
Mm.
into something I think we can all relate to, um, time management and self-improvement. And we've got a pretty fascinating book here to guide us. Level Up Your Life, 10 Strategies for Rapid Personal Transformation by S.M. Sizid Arman. I'm really curious to see what we uncover.
Yeah, well, this book really digs into practical strategies,
Yeah.
not just for getting things done, but like for creating a life that feels more aligned and fulfilling.
And I'm already intrigued by how Arman weaves in these real life stories
Mm.
to kind of illustrate his points. There's Sophie, the artist, struggling to manage her time, Lena, a project manager who's on the verge of burnout, and even Ethan, who discovers that slowing down can actually lead to better results.
Right. Yeah, it's a good reminder that, these aren't just abstract concepts. They're real challenges that people,
Yeah.
face every day. And what's fascinating is that, the book doesn't offer like a one size fits all solution. It's more like a toolkit, of strategies that people can kind of adapt to their own individual needs and circumstances.
Okay, so let's start with Sophie. The book describes her as being incredibly talented, but constantly feeling overwhelmed. It's a feeling I think a lot of creative people can relate to. Just that sense of having so many ideas, but never enough time to kind of execute them.
Right. And the book highlights how, for Sophie, the first step to mastering her time was really understanding where it was actually going. She started by meticulously tracking her activities, and what she discovered was kind of eye-opening.
It's like holding up a mirror to your day, isn't it?
Yeah.
I bet there were some surprises kind of lurking in those time logs. What kind of things was she spending time on that she hadn't realized?
Well, like a lot of us, she was surprised by how much time she was losing to distractions, especially social media. But the key takeaway here isn't necessarily about cutting out social media entirely. It's about becoming more conscious of how we're spending our time and making intentional choices about, where we direct our energy.
So it's not about demonizing certain activities, but about being more mindful and setting boundaries, right? But how did she actually go about reclaiming that lost time?
One of the tools that she used was the Eisenhower matrix, which is a pretty fantastic framework for prioritizing tasks. It helps you to categorize tasks based on their urgency and importance so you can focus on, what truly needs your attention right now.
Okay, so instead of just reacting to whatever kind of pops up first, she was able to create a more strategic approach. Did the book go into detail about how she specifically used the matrix? That's something I think I'd love to hear more about.
Absolutely. The book gives a great example. Sophie had this big goal of putting on an art exhibition, but she was also kind of bogged down with these smaller, more immediate tasks. And by using the Eisenhower matrix, she was able to distinguish between, those urgent but less important tasks like responding to emails and the important but not necessarily urgent tasks like working on her art. And by prioritizing the latter, she was able to make steady progress, towards that larger goal.
So it's about making sure those big picture goals don't get lost in the daily shuffle. But even with a clear sense of priorities, I imagine it can still be a challenge to actually structure your day and get things done. Is that something Sophie struggled with?
Definitely, and that's where the concept of time blocking came in. Sophie started scheduling her day in chunks, dedicating specific blocks of time to different types of tasks.
So instead of just having a to-do list, she was creating a more visual roadmap for her day. Did the book mention any specific tips or strategies that she used for successful time blocking?
It highlighted the importance of being realistic about how much time you actually have and factoring in things like breaks and, potential interruptions. Sophie also learned to group similar tasks together, so, like tackling all her emails during one block rather than switching between different activities throughout the day.
It's like creating those pockets of focused energy instead of constantly shifting gears. But I imagine that even with the best planning, there are still those unexpected demands that pop up and throw you off course. How did Sophie deal with those kind of curveballs?
That's where the power of saying no came in. The book described how she was initially kind of a people pleaser, always saying yes to requests, even if it meant, pulling her away from her own priorities. But she realized that to truly achieve her goals, she needed to be more protective of her time and her energy.
That can be such a difficult shift to make, especially for people who are naturally helpful and want to be liked.
Yeah.
Did the book give any specific examples of how she started saying no without feeling guilty or damaging relationships?
Yeah, it emphasized the importance of being polite but firm, and also offering alternatives. So instead of saying, I can't help you with that project, she might say something like, I'm really swamped right now, but I could take a look at it next week. It's about setting those boundaries without completely shutting people down.
But I love that it's about finding that balance between being helpful and honoring your own needs and commitments. So far, we've seen how Sophie's tackled distractions, prioritize tasks, set boundaries. Are there any other key takeaways from her story that you think would be helpful for our listeners?
One important point that the book makes is that this isn't about becoming like a productivity robot. Sophie also learned to incorporate buffer time into her schedule, recognizing that things don't always go according to plan. And she made sure to schedule time for things that she enjoyed, like going for walks or spending time with friends. It's about finding that balance between achieving goals and living a fulfilling life.
That's such an important reminder. It's not just about getting things done. It's about creating a life that feels good to live. So Sophie's story is all about taking control of your time and creating a structure that supports your goals.
Exactly. It's a great example of how even small changes can make a big difference. But Sophie's journey is just the beginning. We've got another fascinating character to explore, Lena, who shows us the power of pause in the fast-paced world of chronicity.
Okay, so we've seen how Sophie the artist, went from feeling overwhelmed to feeling more in control. Now we're jumping into chronicity with Lena, a project manager who's battling burnout. I have to admit, the idea of slowing down in a fast-paced environment like that seems almost counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But that's exactly what Lena discovers, that taking breaks isn't just about resting. It's actually like a key strategy for becoming more productive and creative. And it's interesting, the book talks about how she stumbles upon this concept through this old book that she finds called The Power of Pause. It's almost like this book within a book offering a different lens on time management.
A book within a book, that's a cool touch. So what kind of approach does The Power of Pause advocate? I'm guessing it's not just about taking long naps in the middle of the day.
Right. It's about being more strategic, with your breaks and understanding how they can actually enhance your focus and energy. One of the first techniques that Lena experiments with is the Pomodoro technique. Have you heard of that one?
I have. It's that classic 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I've always struggled with actually implementing it. It feels like as soon as I get into a flow state, the timer goes off.
I hear you. And the book actually addresses that resistance. It talks about how, especially, in a fast-paced culture, it can feel almost wrong to step away when there's so much to do. But Lena discovers that those short breaks are actually crucial for preventing mental fatigue. It's not just about, giving your mind a rest. It's about allowing it to process information and make new connections.
So it's like stepping back from the canvas to get a fresh perspective on your painting. But did she actually find that those short breaks were enough to combat burnout?
Well, the book emphasizes that different types of breaks kind of serve different purposes. While the Pomodoro technique is great, for maintaining focus throughout the day, Lena also starts incorporating longer breaks, like taking a walk, in a nearby park after lunch.
I'm a huge fan of walking breaks. Sometimes a change of scenery and some fresh air is all you need to feel revitalized. Did the book mention any other types of breaks that Lena found helpful?
Yeah, it talks about this concept of a reset break, which is like a dedicated time for reflection and realignment. So once a week, Lena would go to her favorite cafe, journal in hand, and kind of take stock of her goals, her progress, and any areas that needed adjusting.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about physically stepping away from work, it's about using those breaks for strategic thinking and planning. Did the book mention any specific benefits that she experienced from incorporating these reset breaks?
Yeah, it highlighted how those reflective pauses kind of helped her to stay aligned with her goals, even amidst the chaos of her busy schedule. And it also mentioned how these breaks helped her to identify those early warning signs of burnout so she could take steps to prevent it before it became a major problem.
It's like having those regular checkups with yourself.
Right.
But I'm curious, did she keep these break rituals to herself? Or did they start to influence her workplace culture? I can imagine that in a fast-paced environment, taking breaks might not be seen as the most productive use of time.
That's a great question, and the book actually talks about how her colleagues were initially skeptical of her newfound commitment to taking breaks, but then they started noticing a change in her face. She was calmer, more focused, and surprisingly, getting more done.
So she became a walking advertisement for the power of pause. Did her colleagues start adopting any of her strategies?
They did. The book describes how, some of her colleagues started joining her for those afternoon walks, and others began experimenting with the Pomodoro technique. It's a great example of how one person's commitment to well-being can have this ripple effect, on their environment.
I love that it's like she created a culture of mindfulness in a place where it was desperately needed. So Lena's story is all about recognizing that breaks aren't just a luxury, they're a strategic tool for success. But her journey isn't the only one that challenges conventional thinking. Up next, we've got Ethan, who learns to slow down in order to speed up. Okay, so we've seen how embracing breaks can actually boost productivity even in a fast-paced environment. But now we're heading to Rushville, where the motto seems to be like faster is better, and this is where we meet Ethan, who was all about maximizing every minute. I can already sense this is going to challenge some of my own assumptions about productivity.
Yeah, it'll definitely challenge that idea that, being busy is the same as being productive.
Hmm.
The book portrays Ethan as this guy who's always on the go, constantly multitasking, but like feeling like he's not making any real progress. It's a pretty familiar feeling for many of us, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've definitely fallen into that trap of trying to do everything at once, thinking I'm being like super efficient, but then I end up feeling scattered and stressed, and the quality of my work suffers. So how does Ethan break out of that cycle?
Well, he has this chance encounter with an old friend, Oliver, who advocates for like a completely different approach, slowing down to speed up.
It sounds paradoxical, but
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
It does, but Oliver believes that by, focusing on fewer things and working more intentionally, you can actually accomplish more.
It's like that saying, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what are some of the specific strategies that Oliver shares with Ethan? How do you actually go about slowing down in a culture that values speed above all else?
One of the first things Ethan learns is the importance of like ruthlessly eliminating non-essential tasks. The book described how he starts scrutinizing his to-do list, asking himself, does this really need to be done? And if so, does it need to be done by me? It's about letting go of the things that don't truly move the needle so you can focus on, what really matters.
It's like clearing out the mental clutter to make space for the things that actually deserve your attention.
Yeah.
But I imagine that can be a tough skill to master, especially if you're used to taking on everything that comes your way.
Yeah.
Did the book offer any specific tips for identifying those non-essential tasks?
It emphasized the importance of aligning, your actions with your goals. So before taking on any new task, Ethan started asking himself, does this contribute to my long-term goals? If the answer was no, he would either delegate it, postpone it, or just decline it.
It's about being more intentional with your choices, right? Making sure that your actions are aligned with your desired outcomes. But even with a clear sense of priorities, there's still that temptation to multitask, to try to juggle multiple things at once. Did Ethan address that in his quest for slowing down?
Absolutely. He realized that multitasking was actually fragmenting his attention and making him less efficient. So he committed to single tasking, focusing on one thing at a time, giving it his full attention. The book describes how this shift allowed him to complete tasks more quickly and with greater accuracy, which ultimately saved him time in the long run.
It's like eliminating those mental switching costs that come with constantly shifting between different tasks.
Yeah.
I can see how that would lead to greater efficiency and less stress, but didn't Ethan also incorporate breaks into his routine? That seems like an important part of the slow down to speed up philosophy.
You're exactly right. He realized that, rest and rejuvenation were crucial for maintaining his energy and focus. So he started scheduling downtime into his day, making sure to take short walks, have leisurely lunches, and even just sit in silence, for a few minutes.
It's about acknowledging that you're not a machine, right? You need those moments of pause to kind of recharge and come back to your work with fresh eyes. But I'm curious, how did his colleagues react to this new approach in a culture that values speed?
Yeah.
Taking breaks might not be seen as the most productive use of time.
That's a great point. And the book does talk about how some of his colleagues were initially skeptical, but then they started noticing a change in Ethan. He was calmer, more focused, and consistently delivering high-quality work. So just like Lena, he became this example of how slowing down can actually lead to greater effectiveness.
It's like he's challenging those deeply ingrained beliefs about productivity. So Ethan's story is about recognizing that slowing down isn't about being lazy. It's about working smarter and creating a more sustainable pace.
Exactly. It's about finding a rhythm that allows you to achieve your goals without sacrificing your well-being.
This has been a fantastic deep dive thanks to Level Up Your Life.
Yeah.
We've explored a range of strategies for mastering our time, from prioritizing and time blocking to embracing breaks and slowing down. And we've seen how these strategies can lead not only to greater productivity, but also to a more balanced, fulfilling, and joyful life.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that time management isn't just about getting things done. It's about creating a life that we love.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed, scattered, or just plain stuck, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Level Up Your Life. It might just be the key to unlocking your full potential and creating a life that truly aligns with your dreams. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.